Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome into a Monday edition of On Cue, powered by our wonderful friends over at Played Again Sports 3 Books Bourbon, as we are coming at you live inside the friendly confines of the SR 1029 FM The Game studios. As always, I'm your host, Rich Quinones. We got about an hour plus to play with on this Monday edition, the 2nd of February. 2026. As always, get in on the conversation. You can hashtag on cue. Very simple as well. Connect with us on social media, X platform, Kicks, Rumble, YouTube, multiple YouTube channels as well. You can also, as I mentioned, catch us going forward, millions.co on the Millions platform on the YouTube channel. Just like, comment, subscribe, get connected at Rich Q on Q. On a Monday, hope everyone had a wonderful sports weekend. And as I mentioned, you're enjoying your 2nd of February 2026. As we like to call it a little bit, a man up Monday, but you guys know exactly how we play it. We kind of call the BS takes that you guys, including myself, probably were trying to wax poetic on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, but we add a little bit. We add a little bit to the Man Up Monday when we like to add a little Manolo, Lunes, Mentioso, Locador Radio, Man Up Monday edition of On Cue. So Super Bowl week, we will get into Super Bowl week. Obviously, the big game coming up this weekend, Seattle. That line is sitting pretty against the upstart New England Patriots. We will get into the Steve Tish nonsense as well. Not even nonsense, but I have a lot of thoughts on Steve Tish that I want to get into. You got the Paul George, and I don't even know where we start with Paul George, right? Because that's just the lamest of BS excuses that we all have tried to sit there and say, here we go, but not happening. Glenn Irby, who covers the Philadelphia Eagles and the Baltimore Ravens, joins us at 4:15. No, we're not going to get into Big Baby losing his wig. Oh my goodness. Lloyd Vance is also going to jump on board in the 5 o'clock hour. So here we go. As always, you guys get in on the conversation early and often. We got two, don't forget, 2 locations with our good friends keeping us on the air in the 4 o'clock hour. Played Again Sports, Mount Laurel and Deptford. All right, hashtag on cue. I already see a lot of comments coming in. What else is no? So Super Bowl right around the corner. As I mentioned, there's no buzz to this game. There is zero buzz to this game, but I'm going to say this. As much as there's zero buzz, and let's be honest, there isn't. There isn't. Like, we're trying to figure out ways that this is going to be a sexy game. We're trying to figure out ways this is going to be a competitive game. Is this going to be a blowout? Is this going to be a close game? And listen, I think right now on a Monday, I'm actually thinking that this game is not going to be competitive. And I hope I'm wrong. But for everyone out there, all the talking heads and the podcasters and the radio guys and everyone yapping on the rat ship, the mothership, there's no buzz, there's no juice. That might all well be true. It might. It might be 100% accurate. But the bottom line is this. Come Sunday, wherever you guys are, come Sunday at 6:25-ish, you're nestled in. You're locked in. Now, you might be a savant. You might be kind of goofy like the rest of us, like myself, and pretty much I would say 95% of our listening audience and viewers. You're probably going to get locked in at 1 for 6 hours of, God knows what pregame, especially if you have a dog in the fight, whether you're a Pats fan and or Seattle fan. But you're going to watch this game. You're going to watch it, period. You're going to go with your girlfriend. You're going to go with your parents. You're going to go with your friends. You're going to go to a bar. You're going to go to a restaurant. You're going to maybe just sit in, order out and hang out and watch the game by yourself or a couple friends or go to parties. You're going to watch. And I don't care, if you watch the game 100% all the way through. I don't care if you sit there and you bitch, whine, moan, and complain about a halftime and you throw your social and political views. I don't care. Whatever. But don't try to tell me on a Monday you're not watching this game. Don't try to tell me on a Monday you guys are not going to watch. There's no juice, there's no buzz. Stop. You're going to watch the game. Whether it's going to be a competitive game or not is yet to be seen. And nobody knows. I think this is a good matchup, but I also think Seattle's the better team. I think on paper, Seattle should win this football game. Now, you guys are going to recounter. I know what you're going to say. Sam Darnold, well, he's pretty much has shut a lot of people up. A lot of people up. And New England's a good team, and they're well coached, and they have a very good defense. But this whole idea, this narrative being pushed, yeah, the game doesn't have any juice. Okay, but we've had Super Bowls that haven't had a ton of juice before that turned out to be great games. You can't always get an undefeated Patriots team and a David versus Goliath Giants Pats. You can't get the Eagles trying to knock off the Pats, or the Eagles trying to knock off Kansas City, or Kansas City trying to go back to back, or the Patriots making all their runs, or the 49ers winning back. Like, sometimes you get games that just are not sexy matchups. Many, 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 many years ago, the 49ers against the Chargers, not a sexy matchup, and the game was a blowout. The 49ers against the Denver Broncos, that was not a sexy matchup, and the game was a blowout. We've seen it before. Seattle against Denver, that game ended when Peyton Manning couldn't corral the snap early. The Carolina game against Seattle, or the Carolina game against Denver, I should say. That game, not sexy. It was a blowout. So sometimes on paper, we look at these games and 4.5, 5 point, here we go, 45.5 is the total. What's a storyline? What's something sexy to watch? The game itself to you guys might not be interesting, and you might not watch, some of you. But I can tell you this, 99% of anyone that's breathing come Sunday at 6:25, they're watching this game. Political views, social stance views, all that kind of crap be damned. You don't want to watch halftime, don't watch halftime. No one's putting a gun to your head. You don't want to pay attention. You want to watch the game and hang out and have a couple pops for the commercials. That's fine. But don't try to sell me that you're not going to watch this game. Why? Because in the NFL, we only get so many of these Sundays. I mean, how'd y'all feel this weekend with no football? How'd you feel this weekend with no football? What'd you watch? A little college hoops? You watch my Knicks win 6 in a row? You watch Paul George get pinched and suspended? What'd you watch? I guarantee you're probably flicking around the dial saying, oh my God, where the hell's the NFL? It's not going anywhere. It's a monster, and you will watch. You will watch. You can say you won't, but you will. The game itself might not be an interesting game. Or what if it turns out to be a great game? What if it turns out to be that Seattle-New England game? Run the friggin' football. Give it to Marshawn Lynch. Great play call, horrible execution, whatever. That was a great game. We've had some really classic Super Bowls. And look, it's a long week. It's a long week. It really is. And I know it's so easy to sit there and say it lacks juice. I get it. Right? It lacks juice. It's not sexy, but you have storylines. You got a young quarterback. You got New England that everyone loves to hate. You have Sam Darnold. How can you not be a fan of slinging Sammy Darnold? So there are some good storylines, favorable storylines, but again, I think it's kind of the easy, lazy take, the contrarian take, the chalk take. Yeah, there's no buzz, but you're going to watch. That's all I'm saying. You are going to watch, period. So we'll get your thoughts on the Super Bowl. The other story that came down over the weekend was this report regarding Steve Tish, who's got ownership. He's got a stake in the Giants. And I will say this, being a diehard Giants fan, understanding the culture around the New York Giants and the history of the New York Giants like few do. This to me is an absolute embarrassment. The fact that Steve Tish has to address, having a conversation, association with Jeffrey Epstein, and we all don't need to go back and look at what transpired with Epstein. It's an embarrassment to the Giant organization. And if I'm the New York Giants, and the fact that you have a co-owner that is named in one of the many latest Epstein files, because all these names we know over the last several years, everyone, it's like the worst kept secret in life. These names that are on this list, it's like the knock list, like a Mission Impossible. It's like we sit there and we pretend like some of these guys aren't on the list, right? But we know. You just have a feeling. Well, now that Steve Tish's name comes up in one of these files, and the fact that you have any or had any association with this piece of garbage human being who got off easy, by the way, did Jeffrey Epstein, who got off easy, mind you, took the coward's way out. But the fact that your name appears at least, talking about Tish, at least 440 times. 440 times. If you are the Giants, you at this moment need to separate yourself from Steve Tish, which means you want to have a PR spin, you want to have a statement, which, by the way, was the weakest statement in the history of the world. Go ahead and do it. Don't show up at the building. We don't want to know anything. Don't hang out at, these events. The Giants need to separate themselves from Steve Tish, period. And I think you almost have to go so far as to force him to sell his stake in the ownership group when it comes to New York Giants. He's chairman, co-owner, and vice president of the Giants. Okay? And we know, if you know his background, he has produced dozens of Hollywood films. Dozens of Hollywood films. So, you want to connect the dots, whatever. But his statement that he had, that his PR team tried to spin and come up with, quote, we had a brief association where we exchanged emails about adult women. And in addition, we discussed movies, philanthropy, and investments. I did not take him up on any of his invitations and never went to his island. Now, follow me for a second. I know you guys hate when I say that. As we all know, now he was a terrible person and someone I deeply regret association with. Hold on a second. So, end quote. So, what do you say? You didn't take him up on any of his invitations and never went to his island. Why are you even saying that? Now, I'm not speculating. I'm not saying he did. But what I am saying is, if I'm the NFL, and I'm a little surprised that the NFL hasn't really said much, because a reporter, someone's going to ask the NFL about this. At this moment, though, Giants aside, you cannot be the face of the Giants. You just can't. And I'm telling you, stay away. I don't want to hear any more PR event. Stay away. And if you're the NFL, what does the NFL always position themselves on? What does the NFL always say? The NFL is always about what? Protecting the shield. The NFL always pushes protect the shield, protect the shield. Well, now you have an opportunity to do that. And maybe there's going to be a question or two because it is Super Bowl week. And I know that the last thing the NFL wants is to have to answer questions regarding an owner that might or might not have hung out with Jeffrey Epstein, which is a horrible look all around. The optics, horrible. And I know the NFL will most likely do a thorough investigation. But if I'm the Giants and you just hire John Harbaugh and you have all this goodwill and you think, okay, the franchise is back, the culture has been changed. Here you go, Mr. Mayor, and we know you're dealing through cancer. Get a win. Here's a win. And this comes out, to me, I would have to sit there and say, no, no, you need to separate yourself from us. We want nothing to do with you. We understand about your ownership in the franchise and figure out a way to force this guy to sell because it is a horrible, horrible look to even associate or to have associated with this piece of garbage, Epstein. It's embarrassing. It's lowbrow. It's a disgrace. I mean, what are we talking about? Adult women? Like it's just it really it bothered me. It really rubbed me the wrong way. It really did. It really did. And this is the last thing the NFL wants to deal with. Seriously. I mean, absolutely, just they don't want to deal with this at all. They just don't. So I'll get your thoughts on that. As I mentioned, Glenn Irby on the Eagles and the Ravens, Eagles wire, Ravens wire. You got Tua, might be a little fried fish in Miami. He might be done. Apparently, they're getting ready to cut him. We will dive into that. And I want to get into this Paul George situation. I do. I want to get into this Paul George situation because, you talk about, just a week, and that's what it is. A weak excuse for getting pinched and now having to deal with being suspended. I want to get into that as well. And that's a bad look for the Philadelphia 76ers. Paul George put him in a bad spot. All right, 4 o'clock straight up. Don't forget, we'll take you up to about 5-ish, 5:30-ish on a Monday edition of On Cue. A lot of comments coming in. We will get into that. We'll also talk a little bit about the Vikings firing their GM over the weekend, Adolfo Menas, which is interesting because think about it. Now these reports are coming out that he took 2 weeks off after his kid was born in the NFL where nobody ever takes off. Now, I'm not going to sit there and say that contributed to his firing. I made a joke about it on Friday's show that Sam Darnold basically got this guy fired. But we will we will dive into that as well. So, as I mentioned, a lot of stuff to get into, a lot of comments floating through. NBA trade deadline right around the corner as well. We got you covered. Don't forget, get involved. Facebook, X, Rumble Kicks on the YouTube channel. A lot of comments coming in. And again, you can hashtag on Q. Quickie timeout. Come back in about 30. Talking about NBA Paul George. I mentioned Glenn Irby in about 15 or so minutes. NBA trade deadline is well on their way as well. We'll get to your comments, I promise. And again, we're powered by our good friends over at Three Brooks of Bourbon. Get ready with tea, Played Against Sports, and of course, fresh roasted coffee. Save right now, 20% off, BYP20. Be back in 30. All right, a couple minutes past 4 o'clock hour, a Monday edition of On Cue. And again, don't forget, as always, we like to call it a Manolo Mentiroso Man Up Locador de Radio. A lot of BS takes over the weekend, by the way. Monday Marcus, thank you. Thank you for chiming in, telling me that my Knicks were done now that they won 6 in a row. You can man up on that, Marcus. I appreciate it. Let's get to some comments and then switch gears for a couple moments. Man says, here early, prepared for banker hours. That's good. Early bird always catches the worm. New headphones, who this? AKA Heat 12 Man, AKA Heisman, AKA Steeler Nation, AKA Duval. Also known as Vince. Q mixing up the times, trying to catch us, slipping. But we on a man. He's not fooling us with this interweb thing, Q would say. How about my man, Impact Athletics, checking in? What's going on, brother? Good to have you checking out the show. Q got to start with Big Baby get his wig knocked off. I saw highlights of that. I didn't see the fight, and I didn't see Shakur, which we mentioned a little bit on Friday. We thought he was going to dominate Teamofimo, but no, I was too busy. Let's see. We are, by the way, if you are keeping score at home, we are down to our final 4 Warriors Thailand 2026 with the Thailand Titans. We've got the Sun Devils. We've got fully feared BC, which is a very good squad, and the Naga NAGA Hunters in your final 4. If you are keeping track at home, which, oh, by the way, I'll let you know, Saturday, if you can't sleep, join me 12:30 a.m., 12:30 p.m. Thailand time. That's all I'm saying. I got the schedule, too, for Warriors Thailand. Like, after this tournament, I haven't... The last weekend, I think I went to bed at, like a normal time. And let's just be honest, we got the pup, do a little Netflix, and maybe a little Three Brooks, little sip, and then we kind of conk out. I would say the last time I had a normal weekend where I actually went to bed like a normal person was probably August. Because remember, too, September, October, November, December, we were also doing overseas. So once this ends after next weekend, we roll right into some tourneys in China and Korea. So I'm just letting you know, you can always follow me there. That's all I'm saying. Listen, listen, you got to support, do we not? Right? Q, I'm working Sunday night. Purposely picked up a shift at the part time because I'm so not interested. I'm calling the bluff. I'm calling your BS, Vince. I am calling your bluff on a Man Up Monday. You will be sneak peeking watching the Super Bowl. You will. And by the way, what time's your shift? Right? If your shift is like 9 to 12, you can still get an hour plus in halftime. If you're starting at 6 and you're off by 10, you still get what? Late third quarter, because we know expanded halftime with little Malo Bunny, with Bad Bunny, right? I'm calling the bluff right now. I am absolutely calling it. And now you guys are telling me what you watched over the weekend. I watched a really good game between Nebraska and Illinois, who are both my surprise top 10 teams, FYI. Who coaches Nebraska? How mighty have they fallen? Yeah, Nebraska. I mean, so I'll say this with March Madness right around the corner. Jonathan Marshall tomorrow. So we will talk NBA and we will talk a little March Madness. After football, that's pretty much the coup de grace. And then all of a sudden, we get a little lull. We've got the draft. We've got baseball. But yeah, I mean, look, you got the selection Sunday, but that's not until March 15th. So we have to have a little patience. But don't you guys try to come on the air and tell me you're not going to be watching. I did not. Not this weekend. Not this weekend. I mean, every other weekend, yeah. Every other weekend. But we have Warriors Thailand. That's the commitment. We're doing games. 12:30, 1:30, 2:30, 3:30, 4:30, 5:30 in the morning. It's exactly what we're doing. You know it, and I know it. Sorry, chimes in. Q, you know I'm going to watch, but I don't really give a blah, blah, blah about the game. Yeah, because you're going to watch. I'm not suggesting go out and sit there and, have equity in the game. I'm not suggesting that you've got a dog in the fight here. I'm not. Matt is a big-time Seattle fan. Q, I'm going to be glued for 12 hours of pregame. Ha, ha, ha. And then the other Matt L is a Pats fan. So look, there are Seattle fans and Patriots fans. There are football fans. There's a gambling public that is going to bet on everything from the flip of the coin, how long the anthem is, halftime, the color of the Gatorade shower, everything. The money that's going to be bet on the Super Bowl is absurd. By the way, Super Bowl props later in the week. We kind of tease it for you. Not right now. But don't tell me you're not watching. Don't. I don't want to hear that nonsense. More reports show he's never should have been hired as a GM. Zero football background, just an Ivy League degree. Worked at Barry in Cleveland, then got GM in Minnesota. Bad hire. Yeah, well, what makes it worse, though? What makes it worse is if you are a GM in the NFL, or if you work for an NFL team, you have to understand you are going to miss a lot of family. You're going to miss weddings, birthdays, graduations, births, your child's birth. I mean, it's just, and when these reports come out now that this guy took, 2 weeks off, that's not a good look. And oh, by the way, how about when he took them? How about when he took them? I mean, you got a paternity leave, which is under scrutiny. Look, I understand if you're a regular Joe Schmo working a 9 to 5 and your wife has a kid, yeah, you're going to burn through a little vacation. Yeah, you're going to be there the birth of your child. I mean, who would not want to be there? Now, I can't speak on that because I don't have children, but I'm just saying, I would imagine you want to be there, right? You would think. It's a kind of a special day, is it not? But the fact that he did it, and you're talking about a guy that's a GM of a professional sports team, a professional in the NFL, and you're doing it, that raises eyebrows in the NFL. Because again, and the Vikings can say all they want. It's a culmination of stuff. Let's just be honest. And I also think the biggest faux pas was basically not re-signing Sam Darnold, which totally blew up in their face. But a 2-week paternity leave, not good. And it's during training camp, meetings, practices. You can't work remotely. You can't. You need to be there. You need to be there. Look, can I get away doing remote broadcasts? Yes. Can I get away doing remote fights? Yes. I don't physically have to be on site. But then again, I'm not a GM of an NFL franchise. So if that's the case, yeah, I got to be on site. Like, I got to be there. And it just, to Vince's point, it was a bad hire from the get-go. But again, word travels quickly around the league. This guy's never getting a GM job again. I don't think so. Because of the NFL culture. Players, coaches, executives, I mean, they always miss births of their children. Right? It's not uncommon. It's not uncommon at all. And here's the other thing. So it appeared he made a clear distinction to the Vikings organization. Commitment to the family before he was hired by the Vikes. Hey, good for you, man. You're taking care of your family first and foremost. That's what a man does. But then again, the Vikings shouldn't have hired him because you have to understand what kind of sacrifice you have to make. You have to understand that. You have to understand that. I don't care if you get a fender bender. I don't care if you get an accident. I don't care if you trip and break your hip walking to your job in your office, in the building. You have to be there. You have to be there. Now, some have actually criticized, other coaches in the past for not being or being too, like, for instance, Mike McDonald, the Seattle coach. I think he made a comment that he spends 30 minutes a week with his kid. And everyone was like all up in arms, right? It's a 1-year-old son. Okay, that's not bad parenting. That's his choice. That comes with the territory. I mean, he said it. It's public. People are getting on him. But this is what happens. These guys live in the office. They sleep on the floor. They sleep on cots. They sleep on sofas. You're an NFL head coach. You are not going to be able to just say, I'm going to take a 2-hour coffee break. Not happening. It's not even 24/7. It's like 24/36. Like you're glued to your phone, the computer, to reports. You're constantly engaged all the time. And if you're not, you're going to be out of a job. It is a high, stressful job. And that's why these guys get burned out so fast. But it's not like a regular, and no disrespect, you're working at the food mart at 9 to 5 and your kid's going to get bored. Yeah, you call out, you're taking off. You want to fire me? I'll find another job. This is the NFL, man. You can't do that. You can't. You can't do that. You know it, and I know it. So, yeah, to a couple of you guys' points, if the Vikings knew, which the report is, that he wasn't really going to be fully committed, that's a red flag. That is a red flag. It's like, when you go to these job interviews and they all ask you the same stupid question, where do you see yourself in 5? I can't answer that question. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? I don't know. It's almost as though you feel like it's, you're playing Russian roulette there if you don't get the answer right. But in this case, if I'm a potential GM candidate or a head coach candidate and I'm being recruited, or if I'm being interviewed and the organization's asking me those types of questions, I'm not going to sit there and say, well, I plan on taking a couple weeks off when my kid's born. It's not going to fly in the NFL. It's just not. It's not. And it was a bad hire. And like I said, he made mistakes. He drafted poorly, and they let Darnold walk. And that's just what happens. All right, we got a lot of comments rolling through. We'll get to them in a couple moments. 20 past 4 o'clock hour. See, we can punch up my guy, Glenn Irby, and it's been a win. I hope he can hear me. Sometimes with the headphones, they get a little dicey. What's going on, brother? How are you?
I can hear it. Can you hear me?
Yeah. There we go. Like the Verizon conversation. Good. It has been a minute, and Glenn does a great job with the Ravens and the Eagles. Ravens Wire, Eagles Wire, kind enough to join me for a couple moments. Let's start with the Philadelphia Eagles, and obviously with their new offensive coordinator position, Mannion hiring him. And I know there was a couple of reports that, why are offensive coordinators shying away at the time with the Philadelphia Eagles? And I guess there were a lot of disputed. There were a couple different notions, perceptions. Now, I've kind of harkened back to, who wants to work with Nick Sirianni? It's kind of my thing. But ultimately, this team is loaded with weapons. So why do you believe it took so long? Were they really trying to cast that wide net? Or do you think with some of these candidates, there was some concern that, listen, I know I got to turn this thing around with this offense in a year, or I might be fired because look at their track record.
I think it's a little bit of everything. I think what you say, I think it's some not wanting to maybe work for Sirianni. I think it's somewhat on the Eagles potentially maybe wanting to get a guy who will be there for more than one season, even though, Mannion's a hot candidate. And if he turns that offense around, if they start doing explosive things again, he could eventually leave and become the next, coaching candidate on the tree. But I think it's a lot of different things. I think it's whose playbook are you using, whose scheme are you using. I think a lot of those different things went into there, and I think they also really did want to cast a wide net, get some some guys that have seen different things, get guys that have worked under, people get tired of hearing about it, but guys that have worked under Sean McVay, the Kubiak family, the Shanahan family, different things like that, so you can get more motion, more play action, more playing under center, just a different feel and a different look.
Look, I know he's a young guy. I know they bring in a passing game coordinator too.
Correct.
I still believe that this move does still put, if Nick Sirianni had any input and/or his imprint on this hire, it does also back him into a corner because let's be honest, look what transpired over the last several years with different coordinators. And oh, by the way, he decided to not even go outside the building last year and hire his buddy Kevin Patullo. So now with these moves, how much more do we look at Sirianni and put him under a microscope? And also, talk about him as overall, hot seat going in the next season.
Again, I think it's perspective and who you ask. I mean, if you look at the numbers, his numbers over his first five years are on par with some of the best in history. But you also know the roster he has. You also know the guys that GM Howie Roseman has put around him. So he's going to continue to face scrutiny. If things go to where they're supposed to do, Mannion does what he needs to do. The offense gets back on track. He'll continue to look like that. The hotshot CEO coach that he is. But in terms of if it doesn't work out, 2027, you've got a lot of different candidates who are lurking, and he could potentially be on the hot seat. He could potentially be out despite making the playoffs, each year that he's been the head coach.
I also thought it was one of the reasons, and this was just my opinion, why if you're Sirianni, you probably want to bring in someone who's not an alpha male and that's had head coaching experience, because right away, if you start to falter, if you come out of the gate slow, then Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman are looking around saying, well, if we could get rid of him, if we fire Nick, we can kind of insert the coordinator right in, right? And the other fascinating thing, we talk a lot about the offense, you know, the blame to me, I think you can kind of balance it out, but I feel as though every Monday we are coming on after an Eagles game, whether they won or lost, the offense seemed to struggle. The lack of consistency, trying to force feed AJ Brown the ball. Jalen Hurts, who put up solid numbers, but yet not spectacular numbers to a lot of people. Saquon not running for 2,000 like he did 2 seasons ago. The offensive line, where are you right now with this offense? Because it still baffles my mind that the Philadelphia Eagles have really good position players, especially on the offensive side of the ball, and yet there's no rhythm or rhyme to this offense. So if I were to ask you right now, where do you place the blame, and do you believe making the changes they made, is it going to jumpstart the offense next season?
Well, I think regardless of the change, you have to have a healthy offensive line. So I think, with the one and done in the playoffs, hopefully they'll have an off season where all five guys can get healthy. Lane Johnson, Landon Dickerson played with injuries. Cam Jerkins played with injuries. Jordan Mailata had what could be described as a down year, but he was the eighth highest graded offensive tackle in the league. So if they get things together, then at that point you have a running game. You have some semblance of physicality up front, some semblance of dominance. It's still the idea that when you watch different teams and you watch teams around the league, the idea that you can't be in a rhythm and you can go a full half without completing the pass and you're throwing the ball to the Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, AJ Brown, that's concerning. So that's something we hope that the addition of Mannion and Josh Grizzard, that won't happen anymore. But I think it's definitely a situation where if you get an offensive line, they're motivated, they heard all the criticism, they come back, they do what they're supposed to do. At that point, you have that physicality, you have a run game, and it's just on Sirianni and then the offensive coaches to blend everybody and mesh all that together.
Defensively, there was some talk that maybe Vic Fangio was going to retire. The Eagles kind of, calling him back. Here we go. Let's run it back one more season. And then maybe now I'm going to retire after next season. I look at that and say, if that's the case, then why did you even let, Parker leave the building, right? Because now he's
Right.
defensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys. Like, to me, I think it sets up to be kind of an awkward situation, because Vic Fangio over the last several years always kind of teases, I'm going to retire, I'm going to retire, I'm going to retire. Well, now you're forcing him to come back only to potentially lose him after next season.
Yeah, I think so. I think this off season, going into next season, it'll be about identifying the candidates to take his spot. But I mean, he's been in the league a long time. He's a legend. He's accomplished a ton of things. But I think at this point, you need to find a successor. You need to find someone that can run his scheme, run the defense the way you want. But it shouldn't be a situation where he's undecided and he's coaching with 1 foot in, 1 foot out.
When you look at the makeup right now of the NFC East, and obviously the Giants going higher, John Harbaugh, we'll get into that in a moment. Dallas is still Dallas. Washington had a down year. They got rid of their coordinators respectively. They still have Dan Quinn and Jaden Daniels. And then obviously there's the Philadelphia Eagles. And look, you're not going to be able to get to the Super Bowl every single solitary year. I think the expectation going into the season, looking how everything kind of played out in the AFC and the NFC respectively, you would think, hey, man, Eagles, it's an easy run here. It's an easy road. Now, I believe if they would have had played Seattle and or the Rams, they would have been smacked around. I just don't think the offense was going to be able to muster up any type of consistency, 24, 28 points. But it's a down year. It's a disappointing year. Looking ahead, and I know it's crazy to say in early February, we're a week away from the Super Bowl, they're still the team to beat in the NFC. Do you still put them, though, as a top 2, 3, 4 echelon team in the NFC?
I think so. I mean, I think you have some parts that are departing, but for the most part, the core on the offensive core and the defense will be here. We're not sure what's going to happen with AJ Brown, but if he does depart, you're going to get compensation back for him, and you're likely to replace him with a draft pick or someone in free agent. So I think from a talent standpoint, I think from a culture standpoint, they're still the team to beat. The Cowboys, if they improve defensively, they'll be right there. You expect the Giants to get better in year one with Harbaugh. You expect the Commanders to bounce back with the healthy Daniels.
Yeah, well, you mentioned Harbaugh. I said at the time the Giants needed to do everything in their power to go and get John Harbaugh. Now, I will, to be fair, because the listening audience likes to break balls and they want to remind me that I mentioned Mike McCarthy. That's before John Harbaugh became available, right? And I said, yeah, open up the checkbook, give him the power, whatever you want to do, bring him into the building. I do want to get a Ravens perspective on this, though. I thought Tomlin and Harbaugh potentially on the hot seat. Now, now that Harbaugh is with the Giants, he got fired by the Ravens. He had a long body of work, won early with the Super Bowl, consistency. Was it a culmination of just not being able to have deep runs in the playoffs, knowing you have some really good offensive players and an all-world back in Derrick Henry and an MVP perennial quarterback in Lamar Jackson? Or did everything kind of just come to a head this season because they weren't able to get off to that really fast start?
I think a little bit of everything you spoke about. I think the fact that you get off to the 1-5 start, you enter the season with Super Bowl expectations. I think this year they were 0-4 in games decided by 5 points or less. I think over his tenure they were under 500 in those types of games. So I think that's inexcusable. I think 18 years is a long time for any relationship, let alone someone being a head coach of the same team for nearly 20 years. So I think that played a part. I think time had just run its course, but I think their inability to close games out and their inability to be efficient at the right times made it a situation where Bisciotti had no choice but to act on it.
I go back to the last game of the season against Pittsburgh, and I criticize him because I thought maybe you'll run one more play and try to pick up a couple yards for that kid, right?
Right.
A little more manageable attempt. And I know that he went away from running Derrick Henry here and there. Their defense, they've got some major issues. Is there any legitimacy, the buzz surrounding the Ravens potentially moving Lamar Jackson, even though we know he has a no trade clause? Is that just smoke and mirrors? That's nonsense.
I think so. I think if it wasn't for the no trade clause, maybe it's just something to discuss. But at the end of the day, he's going to have final say. I think everything we've heard since Harbaugh's firing, you heard Bisciotti talk about including Jackson in the hire. From what I understood, they did include Lamar. Jesse Minter spoke, glowingly about him. They have a good relationship. He's talked about improving that relationship. He talked about, they just announced the Declan Doyle hire. He talked about getting an innovative offensive mind, someone that could help him get to the next level. So outside of the Raiders or someone just giving them a deal they can't pass up, I would assume that he'd be here. And over the next month or so, they'll work to get him a contract extension that lowers that huge cap hit while giving them some room.
Minter, I like to hire. I
Yeah.
do. He's a young mind. 42, native of Little Rock, been around the block, put in his time. You go back and you look at his college: Notre Dame, Cincinnati, Indiana State. Obviously, look, you get rid of Harbaugh, and Minter obviously has the ties with Harbaugh to Michigan, and then obviously DC with the Chargers. What's the buzz with Minter right now with the Ravens? I mean, it seems as though it's kind of provided a little juice, a little spark in that building. When you look at Minter right now, tell me why he makes sense going forward as the Ravens head coach.
I mean, it's awkward, but it's one of those things where I think for most people, you sit back and you wonder what if maybe they should have made the move 2 years ago. You watch Mike McDonald in the Super Bowl, maybe that should have been the move. So you get a guy who coached under McDonald, you get a guy who coaches in a somewhat similar. So you're going to have a physical defense. You're going to have Kyle Hamilton take the next step as a defender. You're going to have pressure off the edge. You're going to have different looks on defense. So I think from that standpoint, he just hired, or I know they're bringing in Anthony Weaver as a
Yes.
defensive coordinator. So you have that culture. You have a guy that's been with the Ravens. So I think it's just him coming back, taking it back 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago when he was on the staff, taking that defense back to some sense of physicality, some sense of pride, and then everything, the offense will figure itself out. But I think for them to take the next step, the defense has to get back to being dominant, taking the football away, being a defense that opposing teams are afraid of.
Well, the one thing is, to correct me if I'm wrong, right? Uh, Coordinator's not going to be calling plays, but you needed someone, the players kind of like someone who knows the defense, right? I mean, Weaver,
Correct.
and again, I correct me if I'm wrong. He worked under right Mike McDonough, right, and Minter runs that same type of defense. So
Correct.
smart guy, players respect him. To me, it seems like the perfect hire. I know I kind of asked you this with the NFC East, but now you go back in the AFC North. I mean, you had two long time head coaches, arguably future Hall of Fame head coaches. Tomlin steps down. I think it was more of I'm getting tired of having to answer every week if I'm going to last, right? He steps
Right.
down. I think he's pretty much done. Harbaugh steps down, or Harbaugh gets fired, but you knew he was not, going to take a year off. That's not the type of guy that John Harbaugh is. The Giants come in and they swoop him in. Then you look at the rest of the division right now. Cincinnati, I think Taylor's on the hot seat. Cleveland, who knows? Pardon me. That's a young team. They got to figure out what they're going to do with their quarterback. Obviously, they have a new head coach now that believes they can work with that quarterback. If you handicap the AFC North, kind of like with the Eagles in the NFC East, I would assume that it's the Ravens' division to win.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think because of the quarterback, you have Derrick Henry. And my first thought would be, well, because of the continuity and the tenure, Taylor's the only head coach from the division that stood around. So you kind of believe, well, if they can get it together defensively, Cincinnati would be somewhere as a favorite because of what they have on offense. But
Sure.
I think in terms of Doyle coming in as the offensive coordinator, if you can get that offense running, he's going to get the defense humming. I would assume mostly everyone's back for Baltimore, so they should be the favorite. Pittsburgh, you have some holes there. You have McCarthy coming in. You're unsure of what you're going to do at quarterback, things like that. So I think from the standpoint of Baltimore has the best quarterback in the division. They have the best running back in the division. They have
Hands
a two-time All-Pro in Zay Flowers. Mark Andrews is back at tight end. So if you can shore up some things at offensive guard, like I said, Mentor's going to have the defense, buzzing around, playing with physicality. They should be the favorite, and he should be able to eliminate some of those mistakes and some of those inefficient things that they did under Harbaugh.
Now, I was a little surprised that Monken didn't follow Harbaugh to the Giants.
He
I was,
tried to talk out.
yeah, I just thought it made sense, but I'll tell you though, again, you bring in a guy like Monken, Cleveland hires him, and now he gets to work with potentially, you know, and I don't know if Shador Sanders is going to be a franchise. Nobody knows if he's going to be a franchise quarterback. Everyone goes by video saying, "Hey, man, we tried to draft you." But point being is, you had to get Stefanski out of Cleveland just for the growth of any quarterback that's going to be under center for the Cleveland Browns. But I was disappointed that Monken's not with the Giants. To be quite honest with you,
I think that's just the Browns seeing the situation where you have this quarterback. You may not necessarily, or you not even necessarily because of the quarterbacks that stayed in school and the one quarterback. You can't get Mendoza if you're the Browns. So if you can't get Mendoza, then the next best thing to do is to get a coach who can work with his skill set. You've seen those two interact. You've seen Monken telling, well, the Ravens were trying to draft him and he declined and he ended up in the Browns and they're together again. So in terms of that hire, you hire someone who's going to put him in position to be efficient, who's going to run the ball, who's going to utilize tight ends and different things like that. The hope is Jim Schwartz comes back as defensive coordinator. Even if he doesn't, you still have all the pieces there for a good defense. So it's just about if Monken can get Sanders to play efficiently, not turn the football over, you got a good product there at this point.
yeah, I don't. I think Schwartz with the tenture tantrum. He's a volatile guy. He's a hell of a defensive coordinator, but he's probably looking around saying, "Hold on a second. I kept this defense in check. I gave it, credibility. We won games and stayed in games because of the defense. And now all of a sudden you're not hiring me and I'm the guy everyone's familiar with in the building. Nah, I'm telling you, I don't, I'm not buying it. Ravens 76, be more, 54. Love the handle. Drama between Harbaugh and Monken during the season. It was bad. Yeah, but there's always going to be rifts, are there not? There's always going to be issues, and sometimes you got to look past it, right?
I think that drama was more Harbaugh's the middle guy from the understanding we get. The drama was Lamar and Monken, and Harbaugh was just a guy taking the bullets from both or doing his best to keep the peace with both. So as far as I understand, Harbaugh and Lamar had a good relationship. Harbaugh and Monken had a relationship. It was Lamar and Monken who struggled at times with their relationship, and Harbaugh was the guy who tried to be the buffer for that relationship.
Which is never a good thing. Which
No,
is never. It's look. I think you've got to accentuate Lamar's, his skill sets, right? I mean, but here's also a guy that with Lamar under center, yeah, we know you won an MVP, but won a second MVP, threw for 44 touchdowns, started to become more of a pure pocket passer. I would have loved to have saw that marriage keep working, but you're right. I mean, as soon as Harbaugh's fired, then the handwriting's on the wall that new head coach is going to come in and he's going to want to hire his own staff.
I think the idea is you hope that Doyle can kind of some of those same traits, some of those same characteristics. But him and Doyle's 29 years old, so I think the hope is that he and Lamar can mesh from the ability to relate, relate in life, relate in different things. They're the same age, so from that standpoint, hopefully, with his innovation, his creativity, he can continue to make Lamar an efficient passer, continue to allow him to work from the pocket, but take that to the next step, to the next level.
Lastly, before I let you get out of here, I know it's Monday, but if you kind of look ahead to the Super Bowl, I mentioned there's no buzz, but let's be honest, people are going to watch the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
I don't care what the hell they try to tell me. I'm starting to kind of lean towards if Seattle gets out to a quick lead, it could be a long afternoon for New England. I just think that highly of Seattle, the offensive defense. I'm a huge Darnold fan, but if you kind of handicap the Super Bowl, you think this will be a competitive close game?
I think so. I mean, I think Mike Vrabel has some things up his sleeve. I think that we'll see what he does with Christian Gonzalez. We'll see if he puts him on JSN or if they play some type of zone. But if you can get Gonzalez to take away the Seahawks top receiver and play zone on the other end, and at that point you get enough pressure. Milton Williams is his back, he's healthy. If you can get enough pressure on Darnold, you can see. But I think offensively, the Seahawks are going to score points. I think defensively, they're going to get pressure on Drake May. But I think both teams, because of the quarterbacks, because of how young they are, I think it'll be an entertaining game. And it could really be a toss up in a situation of who has the ball last.
Mm. Oh, well, listen, then that'll keep a lot more people engaged, right? Because we do know some of the Super Bowls have been very close, a lot of drama. But then, harken back, growing up, we got a lot of blowout Super Bowls that were really mismatches. I don't think that's going to be the case. I know it's Monday. I'm just leaning towards Seattle, and I'm a huge Darnold fan, right?
Yeah.
I've always believed in Darnold to the chagrin of a lot of the listening audience. I'm not going to sit there and say the GM from Minnesota got fired because they didn't bring back Darnold. I just think it was a bad hire, but Darnold's proven a lot of doubters wrong, and I think it just might be his day come Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, I think people just like to harp on him because then you expose whether it be the Jets or other franchises. There are 5 or 6 good franchises in this league that develop quarterbacks, and then the rest of them eat them up and spit them out. So I think he's just he allows the conversation about development, about patience, about all those different things. He has a beautiful arm. I don't understand why the Vikings didn't keep him. At worst, you keep him on a 1 year deal, or you scheme it up to where with McCarthy being on a rookie deal, you could have kept both, and they're probably playing in the game. But I mean, I think it'll be a great game. I think it'll be a high scoring game. I think it'll come down to who has the ball last.
Yeah, and that's as fans we love that, right? With one more Sunday to go of the NFL. Interesting point, by the way. Before I let you get out of it, you mentioned about these quarterbacks and Cleveland obviously not going to have the opportunity to draft Mendoza. Mendoza's going to the Raiders. It's worst kept
Right.
secret. Also, Kubiak's going to take that job as well. Everyone now is sitting there saying, well, what kind of distractions you're trying to do these interviews and trying to prep for the Super Bowl, how did it work out for the coordinators with the Eagles, blah, blah, blah. I don't really care about that. My question is these young quarterbacks, we know they make the progressions first to the second year. But you mentioned Darnold, and I think it's a great spot right there because look at some of these quarterbacks that have been able to resurrect their career and they were cast off. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. Do you think the the evaluation process when we look at these quarterbacks, young quarterbacks, it's poor, or is it's poor but sometimes they're just in the wrong spot and they just need a fresh start, i.e. a Geno Smith this year aside, i.e. a Baker Mayfield, a Sam Darnold, right? And the list goes on and on. So where are you kind of at with giving up on these quarterbacks a little too early, or do you believe that it's a mixed bag and sometimes they're just drafted by the wrong franchise?
I think more drafted by the wrong franchise. I mean, it's some mixed bag, but I think Darnold said he didn't really grasp the concept of the league already to get to coaching until he got to Mike Shanahan. And then
Right,
or
right.
Kyle, I'm sorry, Kyle. And then
Yeah, Kyle Shanahan.
you see what Kyle does with Mac Jones. You see what Sean McVay does with quarterbacks. So it's you see what Kubiak has done. So it's a handful of guys AFC, NFC, where they understand quarterback play. Kevin O'Connell's the same way. I mean, McCarthy is a different situation, but you have guys in the league that understand quarterback play. And I think you have a situation where you have owners hiring guys, and depending on who they get as the offensive coordinator, they maybe they don't know how to coach quarterback, as well as we thought. The evaluation process is a little skewed, but I think it says something where there are only 4 or 5 coaches who are really, regardless of who they put out there at quarterback, they're going to get good production, efficient play. And so I
Yeah.
think that says more about the league than it does these young guys coming out.
Yeah, good stuff, brother. You still got the pod going? You still doing the pod?
I need to do it more. So I got some new equipment, but like you and so many others, I need to
Ugh,
do it more.
it never stops though, right? I mean, come on, let's
Right.
just be honest. I mean, after a while, it's like 30 something hours of content during the week. I'm like, what the hell? Where can everyone follow your work? A lot of coverage with the NFL and the Eagles and the Ravens. Have at it.
Correct. You can find me at the Eagles Wire, USAtoday.com. You can find me at Ravens Wire, USAtoday.com. I'm on social media to cover too at NFL, and I'm around.
Yes, yes, you are, brother. I'm glad I'm sorry I waited so long to get you on, but I know
I,
sometimes you're in high demand, bro. You're in high demand.
I need to do a better job of reaching out to you and making sure, I touch base with you as well. So
No,
that's my
bro,
fault.
no, stop. Come on, man. Now the listening audience is going to say, why is Q's always picking on his guests? Now you're good with me. We'll get you back on. We'll try to do it a lot more frequently, but I always appreciate a couple moments gone. Thank you, bro.
Definitely. Appreciate you for having me on, brother, always.
All right, you got it. My guy, Glenn Irby, he's fantastic, man. You got to give him a follow on social media. Does a hell of a job with the content. Also, Ravens and Eagles Wire. Got a lot of comments coming in. I don't know why you guys feel like you're correcting me on a Monday. Again, it's just the constant nature, just the picking on me is utterly ridiculous. All right, hold on a second. What do we got here? Let me scroll down, scroll down, scroll. I'm not even going to read that one. I'm not even going to read that one. Not gonna. Hey, mama, how about this? My man, Coach Rick, Louisiana Spice, stay up so you don't have to. We don't have to get up you. Yeah, see, because you are like an owl. You've got that goofy night schedule, right? And by the way, my man, Coach Rick over there, creating the WGBL, Women's Global Basketball League. Did an awesome job with the Spice this past season. So appreciate him tuning in. Yeah, some of you guys, it's hard. Like it's like 1:30, 2 o'clock. I honestly feel myself, my body's like in a different place. Like I'm focused, I'm locked in calling these games, but then I have to like run out after a quarter at halftime. It's only 5-minute breaks. Wash my face, get a cup of fresh roasted, make sure the pup is, tucked in, lights out. Then all of a sudden, I start to see the sun friggin' come up, and I'm like on game 6. Like, that's not natural. That is not normal. It's not. Vince says, would you like me to post a skit? No, I believe you. I'm just saying, so sensitive. Your shift is 5 to 10. Now, you mean to tell me you're not going to have a TV in the joint? You're not going to do a little peekaboo, a little glancing out the front on the score? Yeah, you are, especially if you're going to throw some shekels on the game. I'm calling the bluff right now. I am calling the bluff right now. You will watch the game while you're working, multitask. New headphones, who this? Should be Hardball's new handle. Not bad. And I did that on purpose, not Cole, who this? New headphones, who this? Seahawks 34, Pats 31. High scoring. Facts. The worst I win is 49ers over the Broncos. That was a horrible Super Bowl. And you felt bad for Elway after a while. Like even the first Super Bowl when they played the Giants, the game was 10-9, and then the Giants just blew their doors open in the third quarter and won at 39-20. But Denver, the 49ers, horrible. Remember Denver and Washington? That game was brutal. Timmy Smith's, Doug Williams, would they score like 30-something points in the quarter? Horrible. Man says, we're experiencing Darnold's Joe Flacco moment. We'll probably get the win, then have an okay career afterwards. Wow. I mean, Darnold's young. Like, let's not forget, Sam Darnold is extremely young. Or is it a Brad Johnson type of career? Darnold's the favorite to win the MVP. Darnold's not even 30 years old. So let's just say, what if Sam Darnold, who is now 28, wins the Super Bowl, wins a Super Bowl MVP, and over the next 5 to 6 years, he's throwing for over 4,000 yards and 30-something odd touchdowns. And now you're talking 250 in his career, over 40,000 yards passing. I think the whole Sam Darnold being a bust conversation, I mean, it ends. We look at these quarterbacks. If you're drafted 1, 2, 3, and you don't have a Hall of Fame career, everyone wants to label you a bust, which makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense. The Sam Darnold, the trashing of Sam Darnold, the hate for Sam Darnold, it's just so bad. It really is. Kevin C. chimes in. Q, are you really insinuating Tish to sell the team? Yes, I am. Yeah, I am. Like, what don't you get? Yeah, it's exactly what I'm friggin' saying. I don't think I can make it any more clear. Oh, hold on a second. So the NFL did make a statement. Let me see what they said. NFL statement on Giants owner Steve Tish. The league is aware of the report and Steve's response. Our office will look into the matter to understand the facts. You know what that is? That's translation. Well, it's Super Bowl week. We don't want to deal with this, and we kind of hope and pray it blows over. And then maybe we'll deal with it after this week. I mean, come on, man. The league is there's such a bunch of friggin' hypocrites. They are such a bunch of hypocrites, man. Anything made public about a player that comes to light is not good for the NFL. Anything that's made public or becomes public that comes to light regarding has to do with involving an owner is worse. It's worse. So you mean to tell me the NFL that prides itself on protecting the shield, protecting the image, God forbid a player gets caught up in domestic abuse accusation or allegations, or a player gets caught speeding, or a player smoking and joking and gets pulled over, or a player gets pinched with a gun. it's always a bad look. And the NFL comes out of nowhere. Right away, we're gathering the facts. Here we go. Then the discipline's handed down. The team gets involved. It's never good. But now you have an owner of one of the most historic franchises in all of sports. And what are we going to do? We're going to glass this over? We're going to, why? Because we're too busy collecting checks? I get. C's chiming in Q. Let's just be honest. Leak statement says one thing. They're not litigating this in public. Facts are facts. Relax. Fine. But I just think it's a joke. I do. I think it's a disgrace because you don't need the NFL to step in. If you're the Giants, you can certainly force Tish to sell his share, to sell his stake. Absolutely. Why? Because it happens to be Super Bowl? Stop. The Niners over the Chargers. So do you want to hear a funny story? What was that? 1994, 95, right? Was it 94? Right, 95. No, 95 they lost to the Packers. So it technically had to be, it was 94, 95. Yeah, 94 season, 1995 Super Bowl. And the 49ers were stacked that year. They were stacked. They blew out the Bears. They beat Dallas. What's interesting about that Super Bowl, the Chargers were really not that good. They weren't. And if you remember the upset, they had the upset over Pittsburgh, which was like, oh my God, are you kidding me? But the game against the 49ers. So it's going to make you laugh. The 49ers were a 19-point favorite in that game. And now it just shows you how long I've been doing this. So I'm on the air. This is right, I want to say was it right after graduation? Or was I still in college? I don't remember. I might have been doing the college radio, but anyway, we were talking about this game and we were breaking down this game. And I remember one of the guys that was co-hosting me, it might have been one of the guys on the college radio station. I don't really remember. He was a big time 49ers fan. So we were kind of we were going back and forth. And I was trying to make a case for the Chargers, even though I knew they were going to lose the game. But I was just trying to, play the opposite side and just kind of come up with, okay, how can the Chargers make this game close? Like, what can they do? Offensively, we know about their defense. What are some of the weapons that the Chargers have, right? And remember that year, Natron Means ran for like 1,300 yards. They had Eric Bieniemy. They had Ronnie Harmon. They had Sean Johnson, right? So I said, well, I think there might be an X factor in this game. I was pulling X factors a long time ago. And I remember they were baiting me because I was getting annoyed. I'm like, well, the Chargers, they're probably going to lose this game by 14. Maybe they keep it close for a little bit. And they said, okay, what's your X factor? I said my X factor in that game was going to be Alfred Papuno. You remember the tight end? He was like a beast. He was like a beast for them, right? I mean, he was just a guy that just, always find himself in the end zone, making a couple plays here and there. I said, I love him with the seam rats. Now, what happens in that game? They get absolutely destroyed. That was one of the worst Super Bowls I've ever seen. That game, it was 14-7. It was 14-7 after one quarter and 28-10 at the half. And then obviously the 49ers just poured it on. I mean, they you just saw they were pouring it on when they were up 28-7. It was bad. It was really bad. Ricky Waters had what, 3 or 4 touchdowns in that game? But yeah, the Alfred Papuno factor, if you recall. 42-10. Redskins, yeah, Redskins at the time scored 35 in the second quarter alone. That was insane. That was a Timmy Smith's game. The one-hit wonder. Remember Timmy Smith's ran for like 200 and something odd yards? You never heard of Timmy Smith's again. Like that was his moment. Timmy Smith's. Still to this day, it bothered me to no end because the Giants were so good in 86. They could have easily repeated in 87, but you had to strike. Washington was not that good. I mean, they weren't. Yeah, I know they won 10, 11 games, but they just barely got through the Bears. They barely got through Minnesota. And obviously, the Denver game was a different animal. And if you remember, too, Jay Schrader was the starting quarterback that year. And Williams, the one play was kind of awkward, and Schrader thinks he's coming in, and Williams like, the hell with this. This is my moment. Get him the hell out of here. And then Williams rose to the occasion. Like that game was bad on so many levels. It was 10-0. This is why that game was bad. People forget Denver was actually up in that game 10-0. And Washington scored 35 points in the second quarter. It shows how and Denver was a favorite in that game. I think the Denver Broncos were maybe a 4.5 point favorite, 5-point favorite in that game. And if you go back, Timmy Smith goes for 200 yards. Doug Williams throws for 340 yards. I mean, Elway was harassed all over the place. That was one of the most lopsided games. And Tampa against the Raiders was an embarrassing game. I don't know if we're going to get that type of game this Sunday. I hope it's a competitive game. I really do. I don't want to see a blowout. But man, I just think I think that Seattle is so good. And defensively, all those different, looks that they're going to throw at May, a young quarterback. Ricky Natil caught a touchdown on the first play of the game. Now that is some very friggin' good knowledge. That is excellent. And yeah, and then it was all downhill. It was all downhill. Carlos had the field goal. You're up 10-0, and then boom. And Ricky Sanders, how about this? Ricky to Ricky. Ricky Sanders scores the first Washington touchdown. I think he had like a $140. A $140 on a couple of receptions. But sometimes we get bad blowouts in the Super Bowl. It just happens. And there's nothing we can do about it. I think this will be a fun game, but I believe Seattle pulls away. I do. And Sam Darnold, look, if he has his moment, give it to him. Like if Sam, maybe this is just his moment. Joe chimes in, Q, thoughts on George? I know you mentioned it. Yeah, I'm going to mention it. I think Lloyd's going to join me in a couple minutes, but I will definitely get into the Paul George whole suspension because I've got some thoughts on that. Drew chimes in, Q, it's not about having no juice. It just seems like it's not a competitive matchup. I'm not saying that. I'm not going to sit here on a Monday when we have all week to dissect it, right? And say that this game is not going to be competitive. What I'm saying is it could be competitive for a quarter or two. And then my gut just tells me that Seattle pulls away. That's all. That's all my gut says. They just start to pull away. I think they're that good of a team. I do. And I think it's Sam Darnold's time. And I know people don't want to admit that, right? Because there are a lot of people that are waiting for Sam Darnold to kind of fall on his face. I don't know why you would wish that. But it's a great, his comeback it's remarkable when you think about it. This guy was a cast off, right? Cast off. And now look at him. He's had 2 seasons where he won 14 games, threw for over 4,000 yards, two different teams into the playoffs, and now he's a win away from becoming a Super Bowl champ. I mean, who would have thought that? I mean, that's a Hollywood story, man. This guy was a cast off, seeing the ghost, dealing with mono, get him out of here in New York. Kevin chimes in. Q, it's not that I'm arguing with you. I'm just saying I think you're rushing to judgment here. It's not rushing to judgment. What I'm saying is you have to, when a story like this happens, you have to quickly separate yourself. I mean, I really, what don't you get? I'm not saying that tomorrow you wipe away what he's meant to that franchise. That's not what I'm saying. By the way, McVay and Snead contract extension for the Rams, no brainers. No brainers at all. The NFL needs to look into this, period. They have to look into this. They can't gloss over it. They can't sweep it under the rug. You can't when a guy's name's appearing 440 times. That's just where there's smoke, there's fire. That's what I believe. That's exactly what I believe. I've always felt that way. And I know for some people, you might feel the opposite, but I don't. And I think the NFL has to do their due diligence. Franchise chimes in. Q, how much gas do you think the Patriots have left in the tank? I don't think it's gas. I don't think that's I don't think that's it. I think what people are looking at, look who the Patriots played. Look at the quarterbacks they played against. Look at the teams they played against. Man, they're really going to get smacked come Sunday. They are going to get exposed. Now, that might be the case, but I think we're selling their defense a little short. Maybe they do get to Sam early on. Maybe they do disrupt them a little bit. I eventually think he's going to settle in, but I'm not going to tell you that New England is one of the worst Super Bowl teams, or participants over the last 20, 30 years. I mean, I'm a diehard Giants fan. And I will tell you the 2000 Giants stunk. They were 12-4. They were not a very good football team. They weren't. They were an okay football team. They didn't blow you away. Collins came on. Tiki ran well. They had a couple weapons. They had the Ikes, and the defense was okay, but they weren't a juggernaut. It just so happened that the NFC was down that year. They beat the Eagles in the divisional round. Ron Dixon returns the opening kickoff. Here we go. You had the Seahorn play with the pick. And then they blew out Minnesota. And they went right down the field, bang, bang, bang. Kerry Collins, Hilliard, then boom to Camella, and the game was over. But they were not a very good football team. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that New England's not deserving of making the playoffs. I'm not going to tell you that New England wasn't deserving of getting the AFC Championship. And I'm certainly not going to tell you that New England's not deserving of being in the Super Bowl. They just might not be the sexy play for you guys, right? And that's okay. All right, 5:05 on a Monday. We catch him for a couple minutes. My guy, Lloyd Vance, host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football, SR 1029 FM The Game. Hopefully he can hear me with his headset on, his cap on. Who knows? Maybe he was snowing. I don't know. What's going on?
I can hear you, brother. How you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Let's start with a couple things. I mentioned this in the 4 o'clock hour. The game itself, the lack of buzz. You and I both believe everyone that's in there saying it's not a sexy game, there's no buzz. Everyone that's saying that come 6:35 Sunday, you're all going to be watching the game.
They are, Q. And in a divisional round, the games average 39 million viewers, and people are excited about the Super Bowl. It's early. It's early. The teams just got there. Santa Clara. It's going to begin, and obviously, you don't have that big superstar player that everybody's talking about. I know Drake May's in contention for the MVP, but he may not win it. And some people are saying, "Oh, he's been carried, etc." But what I like is there are two very good teams. You know, they have all three levels. You know, offense, defense, special teams.
Yep.
They're very good on, and these coaches are they're meticulous. They have worked really well to turn these teams around, and that's the big story. Last year, you know, neither of these teams are in the playoffs, and now they've gotten it right in one season, and now they're going to play for the biggest prize.
Yeah. Listen, I know it's Monday. I still think that Seattle will find a way to kind of pull away in this game, but we can talk more about the game later on in the week, and then we'll do a little extended BYP later on. Just a little housekeeping. The Rams extending Snead and McVay, which is a no-brainer. I mean, I still, if you go back and you rewatch that game, the Rams had so many opportunities to win that game. But the Rams, the franchise is telling you, look, these are the cornerstones, right? We've got the head coach, we've got the GM in place, we got everything that we need in place to get back to the NFC title game and make another run here.
They do, and Snead's done a great job in terms of rebuilding that team, particularly on the defensive side of the football. You know, they lose Aaron Donald, and they didn't miss a beat, and they brought so many good young players in there, and you know, it's just situation. That's a tough division. You know, you get three teams in that division make the playoffs, and they're fighting week in week out against each other. And McVay's done a great job in terms of just staying the course. He's an offensive minded guy, and he found a way to protect Stafford, get the ball out of his hands quickly. They have a running game, two good receivers. Obviously, he'd probably like to have some of the decisions he made in the NFC Championship game back in terms of, whether to go for it, not go for it, etc. Um, they were not very good on third downs, and that just killed them in that game. But and the special teams, obviously, that was that big fumble. But yeah, I think it's a great decision bringing them guys back, and you want that consistency because everybody's trying to find that GM and coach that can work
Yep.
together, and that quarterback, that triangle to work together and build a team with.
Lloyd Vance, kind enough to join us, host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football. You hear him every Monday night, 8 to 9 on SR 1029 FM The Game. And of course, his appearance powered by our good friends over at Played Against Sports, two locations, Deptford and Mount Laurel. Denver fires their offensive coordinator, but they turn around and they keep it in house. Davis Webb, quarterback coach, offensive coordinator now. You've got Logan Kilgroy, Broncos offensive assistant for the last 3 seasons, now quarterback coach. I like Davis Webb. I think this is a good move for the Denver Broncos. You got a former quarterback in there with a young quarterback in Bo Nix. I do want to ask you, though, what about some of these offensive coordinator positions? So, I mean, the Giants right now, they were looking at Webb. Right now, he lands or he stays with Denver. I that was so two things. I think what would have been a really nice hire when you talk about offensive coordinator, one of them was Munkin. Obviously, he's off the board. The other, Davis Webb. Obviously, he's off the board. Now, what are the chances they turn around and they bring in a Kingsbury?
Well, he seems to be the hot name still left on the table, Q, and they're talking to him, and I'm hearing he's one of the final two guys for that job, and yeah, he could come in there, and he's shown that he can work with a young quarterback. You know, think about the work he did last year with Jaden Daniels. I mean, the playbook was perfect for him, and they ascended. So yeah, with Jackson Dart, obviously everybody knows good rising young quarterback. Obviously needs to kind of pull in the reins a little bit in terms of um, seeing the field, and a good coaching would help him. So I think it definitely Kingsbury can come in there. That's going to happen. But the thing is, does he know hardball? Do they have those tentacles? You see that all around the league. Q. You know, they work with former guys they work with over the years, and it may just need to be okay. You know, are we all on the same page here?
I'm sure you'll talk about it at great length this evening and or this week. Mannion now the new offensive coordinator. Obviously, you had some other top targets kind of slip away. Now they're bringing back Fangio, but again, it looks like it's only going to be for one more season. So they're still going to have to find a replacement defensive coordinator when the time comes. How about now the Eagles filling in the spots, filling in the blanks? Obviously, this coaching staff under Nick Sirianni.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting, Q, because all the frontline guys, McDaniel and some of the other guys, they took their name out of running for
Yep.
this Philadelphia Eagles job, and there's a lot of extenuating circumstances around this position. Obviously, you got Sirianni there looking over his shoulder. You have the um, Laurie and Howie Roseman placing this person on Sirianni's staff, and then can this person work with Jalen Hurts and kind of rebuild him and that offensive line? Stoutland actually they took away his run coordinator title too, so he's going to be in the mix there as well. So a lot of questions there, but Sean Mannion, he's been around the league in terms of being a backup. He's only been a head coach 2 years, not called plays before, so a lot of people are like, okay, little trepidation there. But remember when Andy Reid first unknown, hadn't really called plays underneath Mike Holmgren. So we'll see how Mannion does. And they brought in Josh Grizzard, who was the Tampa Bay OC last season, to kind of work with him. But it's a fluid situation, Q, and a lot of people are like, okay, is this thing going to blow up? And Laurie and Roseman, if it doesn't work out, they're going to make some big changes after next season.
Yeah, worst kept secret too. Raiders. I mean, I've talked about this for the last couple of weeks. I mean, I thought it's a no brainer. They're going to go after Kubiak. I figure that Tom Brady was going to do everything in his power. He's expected to be their new head coach after the Super Bowl. But again, you're going to get people come out. Well, why are you taking these interviews? You should be game planning. Blah 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 blah. Look what happened with the Eagles and their coordinators. Looking at some of these other jobs, and then what did they do in the Super Bowl? Blah 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 blah. But point being is that Kubiak to me seems to be the perfect fit, especially since the Raiders are going to draft Mendoza.
Yeah, and we knew he was going to get one of the jobs. And the thing is with him, as you're moving along and your team makes a Super Bowl, a lot of people are like, okay, it's a lot of backdoor situations where it's like a wink, wink, oh, continue staying with your squad, but you're the guy that we want. And you saw that with the Saints last year with Kellen Moore. They were going to hire him, and it was everyone knew it around the league. It just wasn't official. So Kubiak's coming in there. He's got a lot to clean up. Q. It's good that they have Tom Brady in the ownership group, and he can kind of pick his brain and kind of work with John Spytek, the general manager, to kind of rebuild that roster. They do have Bowers at tight end. They do have a good young running back, but Mendoza was looking like he's going to be the pick. He's a rookie quarterback, so you can't expect that success right away with him, but he'd be a good building block. And then how much is Mark Davis going to get involved? Because we know he's kind of a meddler at times.
Um, Last one for you. I know we got you for a couple minutes, and I know you'll be on the air tonight.
Yeah, yeah, definitely going to be on the air tonight and looking forward to it. And we're going to start talking about the game. Obviously, all these openings. We'll talk a little bit about the Senior Bowl. I know you probably uh, not talking about the Pro Bowl games either. They're tomorrow. I may spend about 5 minutes on that, but yeah,
Well, I
lots
was
to talk about.
I was just going to ask you because a lot of people think maybe the game's not going to be competitive or it's going to be boring. We mentioned, and I know you've said this over the years when you've had conversations with Doug Williams. That Super Bowl that people forget strike season, right? Only 15 games that year. It was bad watch. I thought the Giants could repeat it in '87, but be that as it may, that was a blowout. The 49ers against Denver, that was a blowout. Tampa Bay against the Raiders, that was a blowout. I felt growing up, we had a lot more blowouts than we did close games.
Yeah, it happens a lot, Q, where one team is focused and another team, you know, they may not rise to the occasion, and yeah, you're going to get those blowouts. I think about Dallas beating up on the poor Bills all those times, and it just can happen where things start going wrong, and the next thing you know, turnovers happen, and then other team starts rolling on you. So yeah, we'll see how it turns out. Hopefully, you get a nice, good competitive game. But last year was a blowout. Let's face it. Yeah, Kansas City put some points up at the end, but the Eagles were firmly ahead in that game, and they took their foot off the gas. So it's hopefully a good game, and we'll see how it goes. But yeah, I'm excited for it. I think you got to build it up around two good teams, and the biggest storyline obviously is your guy Sam Darnold. Is he going to keep it going, or is he going to turn back to seeing ghosts, man?
Destiny's darling, and yeah, I refuse to bring up last year's Super Bowl. Sam's going to be all right. All right. 8 o'clock, 8 to 9 tonight.
Yes, sir.
All right. 8 to 9 tonight. You can get that on the Comcast Coastal Sports Digital Network. I got to do something for Comcast. It's on my mind. It's unbelievable. Coastal Sports, I'm all over the place. Coastal Sports Digital Network. I got alerts coming in from Thailand as we speak. Coastal Sports Digital Network. SR 1029 FM, The Game. Lloyd at 8 to 9 does a fantastic job. Give him a follow on X at Lloyd Vance. He and I will do a long edition of BYP this week. And I know on a Football Friday, we will get into the big game, as we like to say. All right, brother. Always appreciate it. Thanks for making time for a couple moments, man.
No problem, Q. Thanks for having me on, man.
All right. There you have it. My guy, Lloyd Vance. All right. Let me get to some of these comments. Santonio Holmes catching the pass in the corner of the end zone versus Cardinals. Best I've ever seen. Capped off 100-yard interception from Harrison before the half. Good old days. That was a very good Super Bowl. Giants and Pats. I mean, the high drama, right? Let me ask, what was the most thrilling Super Bowl you witnessed? Rams versus Titans. Mike Jones's tackle at the 1-yard line. That was an epic Super Bowl. I would say the first thrilling, epic Super Bowl. The first Super Bowl I really remember, even growing up, and I'm dating myself, was probably Miami and Washington when Riggins broke it off tackle, broke free of McNeil, right? Fulton Walker had the kickoff return for a touchdown. The first one I can really recall being an epic ending was Cincinnati and the 49ers, Montana to Taylor, because everyone thought he was going to Rice. Everyone. That was like the first thrilling Super, because remember, a lot of them were bad. They were not competitive. You know, like I said, the Giants winning 39-20. 1990, to me, though, is still, I look at the 90 Super Bowl because of the backdrop and everything that happened leading up to that game. And the Bills were a juggernaut. And the Giants lost Sims. The Giants knew they had to control the clock. They knew going into that game, there were two things the Giants just wanted. Actually, three. The game plan was pretty simple. The backup quarterback, don't turn the football over. And one of the biggest plays of that game was when Bruce Smith sacked him in the end zone for a safety because he almost lost the football. That would have totally, that play, if they go down in that, if the Giants fall behind on that play, and that's a safety, and instead of it being what would have been a 10-9, I believe, it would have been 13-9. I got to double check. But point being is they're not running the football. Their game plan's out the window. They're not running it with Otis Anderson. That whole game, the complexion of that Super Bowl changed on that one play. Totally changed on that one play. Because if you give up a touchdown there, you're done. You are absolutely done. Instead of, so the Bruce Smith play actually makes it, and this is why it's unbelievable. It's 10-3. It's 10-3. And it's after they get a short 1-yard rush. So you're midway in the second. If Bruce Smith strip sacks Jeff Hosteller and they score a touchdown there, it's 17-3. The Giants are not winning that game because they were a ball-controlled offense. Instead, it's 12-3. They go right down the field, and right at the half, late at the half, Haas hits Stephen Baker, and now it's 12-10. It's a different ball game. That to me was one of the most thrilling Super Bowls. The last drive, even in the fourth quarter, early on, Thurman Thomas with the 31-yard run, and I'm like, oh my God, the Giants are going to lose this game. And then they got gassed late in the fourth quarter. Buffalo goes right down the field, and here we go. Norwood wide right. That was an epic Super Bowl on so many levels. That was probably one of the most thrilling Super Bowls. And I remember watching that game I mean, I couldn't, for the life of me. I was like, I can't believe this. I can't believe this. For the life of me, they're going to lose this game. I was going to be devastated because the emotional roller coaster. They beat the Bears in the divisional round. They go on the road. They knock out Montana. They have a fake punt. Matt Barr, 5 field goals, 15-13. There's going to be no three-peat. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe they're going to the Super Bowl. And the Bills were coming off a run. I mean, people forget just how good that 1990 Buffalo Bills team was. They were destroying teams. They put up 44 against Miami, and then in the AFC Championship, they absolutely dog walked the Raiders 51-3. And I was like, there's no way. There's no way the Giants are winning this game with a friggin' backup quarterback. I really felt that. I felt that. Now, as a fan, you know, I'm there's a part of me like, okay, they can win, but the reality is it's going to be really hard. And they had to slow down that offense, and that's what they did. That was an epic, epic Super Bowl. Q, I took a crash course in Spanish on Baffle this week. I'm not ready for Super Bowl halftime show. I'm so old. I was in the old sombrero in Tampa when the Giants beat the Bills. You were there? Whoa, 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 whoa. $150 for a ticket to that Super Bowl? Yes. Whitney sang, lip sync the Star Spangled Banner. Correct. My dad let me drink a beer with him after the game at some bar. I was 18 years old. Oh, man, that's fantastic. My Ravens versus the 49ers was a thriller. The 49ers were lucky. The blackout happens, kill my Ravens momentum. It would have been a blowout if that blackout didn't happen. That was a very good Super Bowl, too. That was a very good Super Bowl. That was a back and forth Super Bowl. That's all you can ask for. That's all you can ask for. You just want the Patriots and Seattle a couple years ago was a great Super Bowl. The Patriots coming back big 28-3 against Atlanta was a great Super Bowl. Hell, even the Eagles beating the Patriots for their first Super Bowl win, even it sickened me, but that was a great Super Bowl. There was high drama. Kansas City and the 49ers, Kansas City and the Eagles. Those were good games. I mean, look, more times than not, we get classics. We're spoiled because we want it to be a great game. We want it to be a great game. Look at these two teams. Seattle won 16 games total. New England won 17, 16-3, 17-3. It should have the makeup of a great game. It should. Marty chimes in, Q, I'm not really interested in the Super Bowl, nor am I actually going to watch the halftime show. I think it's crock. You're entitled to that. That's fine. You're entitled to. I saw NBC's going to broadcast a game from the pregame show from Alcatraz, right? Little Clint Eastwood, Escape from Alcatraz. Great movie, by the way. Remember that movie, Alcatraz? They shut down, right? After Clint Eastwood and Fred Ward decided to escape. Never found the bodies. Escape from Alcatraz. Classic. Wonder how they're going to set that up. When did that close down, Alcatraz? I know Alcatraz, I think it was in the 30s, right? That they built Alcatraz. But when did it close down? I don't know. Was it after Clint Eastwood decided to escape? I gotta find out right now. Hold on. Let me see. It closed down, according to AI. Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary closed on March 21st, 1963, due to high operating cost, severe structural deterioration from saltwater corrosion, not solely because of the famous June 1962 escape. Frank Morris, aka Clint Eastwood. That was a very good movie. I think in some ways Shawshank took a little bit from that movie. The prison break. Now I just pulled up, it almost closed down after a 1939 escape. Man, imagine being stuck on friggin'. What would be worse? Being stuck on Alcatraz, or if I'll tell you another classic movie about a jailbreak. I think an underrated, one of the all-time greats is Papillon. If you get a chance, 1973, Steve McQueen, fantastic. Dustin Hoffman, unbelievable. I love Steve McQueen. He died way too young. I think he died 49, 50 years old. But he was just a fantastic actor. But watch Papillon. I don't know what would be worse though, sticking me on Alcatraz or Papillon. I think they were on Angel Island. I mean, either way, I'm screwed. It's going to be very hard for me to escape. Beyond. I mean, and Dustin Hoffman went goofy in the movie. And Steve McQueen, I'm not going to ruin it for you, but you got to watch to figure out how he finally breaks free. So you got Shawshank, you got Escape from Alcatraz, you got Papillon. Trying to think of some other all-time great prison break movies. We go Lock Up with Stallone or no? Tango and Cash? What else? I'm trying to think. Papillon was a classic. Here we go. The Rock. Good movie. Good movie. Yeah. Very good movie. Yeah. Who doesn't like Sean Connery? Nicolas Cage. Honestly, I'd rather spend 24 hours on Alcatraz versus watching the 2026 halftime show for the Super Bowl. You guys are brutal, man. What, at the end of the day, let's just be honest. I understand everyone, and I didn't watch the Grammys last night, and everyone had their opinions and their thoughts. And, is it, when we say shut up and dribble, shut up and play, shut up and sing, whatever. You have to understand something, though. There's always going to be two sides, right? Left, the right. You watch certain networks. Certain networks you flip on in the morning, the afternoon, or the night, they will praise the POTUS. They will praise. They'll never say something to undermine President Trump. All they're going to do is placate because they want to get on his good side. So there's Network A. Network B will dig deep and figure out a way to discredit, to criticize, to mock, to ridicule POTUS, right? So point being is, it's just like with these Super Bowl shows, you've got two sides of thought. And the big hot topic in this country right now, obviously, is ICE. It's the big topic, not the one that's, still piling up outside, but it's ICE. So everyone has an opinion on it. Everyone has an opinion on it, and that's okay. And you don't have to agree. It's like a sports take. So now you've got a entertainer, a talented entertainer, right? Who is what? He's Puerto Rican. So he's going to have his own thoughts. You know it, and I know it. He's Latin. He's going to have his own thoughts. So when you watch the Grammys, when you watch the Oscars, yeah, after a while, it probably rubs you the wrong way. You just go up and accept the award. But the problem is they have a platform. They have a platform to speak. They have a microphone. They have a podium. So the last thing they're going to do is thank mom and dad first and foremost, or God. No, after Dios, after God, they're going to turn around. They're going to wax poetic. They're going to sit and say what they can't typically say during the week in front of nobody. Now you've got hundreds of millions of eyeballs. And I'm sure the NFL, the Super Bowl, I'm sure they're probably going to be watching this closely for those little messages, those subconscious messages, or how something's spoken or worn. I mean, but again, ultimately, if it's not your cup of tea, you don't have to watch. Flip the dial. You don't need to listen. That's all I'm saying. I'm not advocating for one side or the next. I'm not. If you don't like it, you don't have to watch. Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift bought a suite for how much? $3 million. Oh my goodness. That's a hell of a suite. What do you think they serve in that suite? You think they're going finger food in a suite like that? I don't think they're going. I mean, $3 million, you're not going finger food. You're not. You're not chopping up a little cheese platter. I don't think so. All right, got to start wrapping it up on a Monday. Jonathan Marshall tomorrow on the NBA. I did want to, well, you know what? I will say this, because a lot of you guys are commenting. The whole Paul George thing, which I'll get into a lot more tomorrow. So Paul George, well, no, there's no fried hot dogs and fried eggs. No, not happening with a little Tabasco. The Paul George 25-game suspension certainly hurts the Philadelphia 76ers. Paul George comes out and he says what he comes out, and the medication, didn't know what he was taking. Everything's about, mental. We'll get into it tomorrow with Jonathan Marshall. It's a costly suspension, especially the way the Sixers were playing, giving a little hope to the fan base. But I got some thoughts on that. We'll dive into it. NBA trade deadline right around the corner. My Knicks have won 6 straight. Oh, by the way, so a little NBA tomorrow. We'll get into a lot more of the Super Bowl as well. No sticks, no pigs in a blanket, no cheese platter, no trays. No, not at all. No finger foods. That's not happening. Costanza's not walking in there dipping chips. That's not happening. All right, good stuff from Lloyd. Good stuff from Glenn Irby. Probably fire off around 4 tomorrow. Check out the YouTube channel for notifications. Good stuff for the past almost 2 hours. You guys have a wonderful Sports Monday. As I mentioned, a lot more Super Bowl, NBA tomorrow, trade deadline. We'll mix in a couple hot stove baseball as well. We got to sign off. We got some more overseas in about 7 hours. So we'll be back in the saddle tomorrow. Check out the YouTube channel. Subscribe, like, and comment. You'll get the notifications. Have a wonderful Sports Monday. If you guys are driving around in this cold, be safe, be sound, buckle up, don't text and drive, stay warm, have a little hot toddy, a little Three Brooks bourbon, if you should choose. And we'll do it again on a Tuesday edition. As always, I'm Rich Quinones. Thanks for tuning in to a Monday edition of On Cue. Back in the saddle tomorrow. Hasta luego, buen día.